The 5 Michael Bay directed Transformers films, from 2007's Transformers to 2017's Transformers The Last Knight, are notorious for a multitude of reasons. People often point to the use of CGI, the questionable humor, and the explosion-laden action set pieces as notable features. However, perhaps most notorious of the bunch is the quite awful writing in each film, with recycled plots, continuity inconsistencies, and often complete lack of any form of character art. These complaints are far from undeserved. Despite being one of the highest grossing film franchises in cinema history, these movies are simply put, not very good. And when it comes to the writing, it's quite shocking to see how awfully incoherent it often is. Sometimes sitting through these movies, you ask yourself, who wrote this? And sometimes the answer is, in the case of 2009's Revenge of the Fallen, literally no one. Shia LaBeouf once said of it,
and that's sort of like where we were at in the second movie, you know? We were given a date, we were given a bunch of money, we were given a bunch of toys, and we had no script.
And without the premium luxury of filming with the script, it's shocking Revenge of the Fallen can keep track of its own story even a fourth of the time. It's hard to believe that there's any worth in considering these stories, but I like to think that somewhere in there has to be a consistent narrative. There must be some way that we can explain some of the logical fallacies of these movies. Even in the lack of good writing, there were interesting concepts to be played with in each film, and in a recent discussion with a friend, I figured out that there truly is an explanation to many of the continuity breaks that pop up so often. So maybe I can share that with you, and we together can find some sort of silver lining to the multiple hours of torment Mr. Michael Benjamin Bay has put us through, as we attempt to solve Transformers on this episode of Flip Scripts. At a first glance, it seems like the movies can't even consistently answer the question, where did the Transformers come from? On a surface level, Cybertron, the big metal planet that they had to escape due to an energy crisis. But push any further than that, and it seems to be an almost instantaneous continuity error. In the first film, Optimus Prime opens with a clear answer in the narration.
Before time began, there was the cube. We know not where it comes from. Only that it holds the power to create worlds and fill them with life. That is how our race was born.
Simple, right? Optimus states the cube, also called the Allspark, held the power to create not only their planet, but their race. And the first film pretty much follows that point. The second and third films follow up on that idea pretty simply, with the whole Cybertron energy crisis being further pursued, and the Allspark even having a role in how the second film plays out. And then we get to number 4, Age of Extinction, in which our antagonist claims that the Transformers were actually created by a separate race of aliens who apparently bombed planets to harvest a special metal called transformium, very catchy name, to build their race. And even further, in the following film, The Last Knight, Optimus Prime comes in contact with Quintessa, a being of immense power who claims to be that creator, even though looking completely different from what we're shown in Age of Extinction. So, what's the truth here? Well, actually, it is laid out pretty clear. The Allspark did create the Transformers, and the creators mentioned in Age of Extinction did build them. It can be assumed that the creators used the transformium they harvested and imbued the bodies they created with the energy of the Allspark. It isn't unknown for species to manipulate the power of the Allspark for their own means. The government organization Sector 7 demonstrated this when showing Sam Witwicky and others the Allspark's ability to create life through mutating human machinery into some twisted form of a transformer. In addition, Sam Witwicky used a shard of the Allspark to resurrect Jetfire in Revenge of the Fallen. So why would it be so hard to assume that a more intelligent species could create an entire race given the resources? And what of Quintessa? How does she fit in? Well, there could be multiple explanations to that one. Maybe we could assume she could easily be one of the creators, perhaps encasing themselves in some sort of metal armor, preserve or protect. However, the movies give us a more clear answer. In The Last Knight, one of the Transformers who had dealings with Quintessa professed her to be the Great Deceiver.
Quintessa is the Great Deceiver!
Implying that she may be lying about the entirety of who she even is. So more likely than not, she's a being who came in contact with the Allspark and the Cybertronian race once before, and just took the mantle of creator herself, even if she wasn't truly what she professed to be. So, with the origin of the Transformers answered, it would be good to consider how exactly they're made up, because it seems to vary from film to film what constitutes a typical Transformer. Why are Allspark mutations created from the cube's energy not fully fledged Transformers? Why do the man-made Transformers in Age of Extinction transform in such a different way? Well, to answer that, we need to turn to IDW Publishing's Transformers comic books, and specifically a concept known as Rossum's Rule of Thirds, a physiological principle stating that a Transformer's physical makeup is reliant on the brain module, which represents the mind, the spark, containing the life force, and the transformation cog, which controls the natural ability to transform. Now, while the movies don't have exact replacements demonstrated for each one of these pieces, they do have something that's similar. The brain module has a counterpart of some sort, as brain waves are a plot point multiple times, most notably when Megatron's severed head was used to program the man-made creation Galvatron, who turns out to be Megatron all along, and the variety of other Transformers drones by the technology company KSI. Next, the spark is specifically mentioned by Optimus Prime himself.
We call it a spark. It contains our life force and our memories.
So, clearly, the spark contains the energy that the Allspark provides. And finally, we come to the transformation cog, which has no specific organ as a counterpart, but instead has transformium itself. Transformium is seemingly what allows these robots to not only transform once energized, but contain the Allspark energy completely. Therefore, it's as a T-cog would be. And with that, here comes the biggest difference from the comics we've borrowed this concept from. See, in IDW's Transformers, they're often able to function without one of these components. But in the films, this clearly isn't the case. We've seen immediate death come from the removal of a spark and a brain module, and this clearly explains why some of the Transformers offshoots don't correctly work. The man-made drones that may have had transformium and programmed brainwaves lacked a spark containing a normal life force or memories, meaning that they were transformed, sure, but with no distinct traits, going from one form to another. We see this is proven when Megatron regains normal transformation in The Last Knight, after apparently Quintessa gives him a new spark. And what of the Allspark mutations? The human machinery imbued with pure Allspark energy? Well, they're not exactly right either. They have little to no transformium in them, even though they seem to have a spark and some form of brainwaves. They could, however, be lacking multiple necessary pieces, which would further explain why they're so crazed. In fact, it seems important to look a little closer at that mystery metal. Transformium obviously is what contains the power of the Allspark, and it even most likely is what the Allspark itself is made of. It's kind of the key that brings everything together. In fact, it's introduced, if not really explained, much earlier in the franchise than we ever noticed. The Matrix of Leadership is clearly our first look at the substance. It checks all the boxes. A metal object, which takes a different form, the real creative choice of a sand-like material, and contains great energy that could be compared to the cube as it's used to bring Optimus Prime and later Sentinel back to life, much like shards of the cube that brought back Megatron and Jetfire. So clearly we've seen transformium, even if we didn't know what it was. But doesn't that raise a question? If transformium is only manipulated by Allspark energy, why was Sam able to use the Matrix in Revenge of the Fallen? Well, if we remove ourselves from the high-concept fever dream that Sam had in Revenge of the Fallen, it's pretty clear that Sam did possess some form of Allspark energy. The Fallen himself stated,
Cube was merely a vessel. Its power, its knowledge can never be destroyed. It can only transform.
Pretty on the nose there, huh? So, just as we've proved, the Allspark's power can be transferred, much like it was unto the Transformers themselves. Some of it found its way into Sam, when he touched the Allspark shard at the beginning of Transformers Revenge of the Fallen. But here's the thing. Isn't that quite concerning? There's no reason he should be absorbing Allspark energy. It'd make things like Allspark mutations, and those were insane. If he absorbed that energy, like the movies are telling us he did, and did it without a spark or transformium in himself, then by a quite literal definition, Sam himself is an Allspark mutation. Well, I mean, that would come to explain why he's so consistently erratic in these films. And the same for Sam's great-great-grandfather, Archibald Witwicky, who went insane and started drawing symbols, not only from seeing Megatron, but by absorbing some of the Allspark energy that Megatron was tracking after he activated his navigation system. In fact, that could explain why multiple characters are so consistently erratic throughout these films. The entirety of Sector 7 had contact with the Allspark, and Simmons, the former chief agent of the organization, who notably went insane became obsessed with the Transformers, himself even noted that they were radioactive, and even touching them might not be a great idea.
Hey, still radioactive.
This is of course a really interesting way to explain the quite comedic acting performances of the various cast members, but it's completely fair to assume, given what we're presented with, they're slowly going insane. Much like the mechanical Allspark mutations that were shown. And what was Sam's fate in these movies? Well, according to The Last Night, he's dead. Seems like his crazy eventually caught up with him. And of course, this is a humongous stretch, and pretty much a handful of assumptions about how this universe works, but it is pretty well based on what the movies tell us. This doesn't solve every inconsistency present, as I didn't even touch the very confusing timeline that we're told to believe. And this isn't saying that these films are secretly genius, or actually masterpieces, because they very much aren't. But it's instead a fun way to bring out the point that even in something as convoluted and poorly done as these movies, good ideas and coherent concepts that are inherently more interesting than the story being presented can be found. If you take away anything from this video, even if it isn't the specifics about the makeup of fictional robots or theories about the universe, it should be analyzing things that may not be very good can still yield something fun to consider. And, maybe this video was just written so that I can say maybe Transformers can be, let's say, more than meets the eye. Hey, it's Flip. This episode of Flip Scripts was really fun. I got to talk about some of the oddities of the live-action Transformers films, which, despite their flaws, I grew up watching and have a solid love-hate relationship with. There's a lot I didn't particularly get to that got cut in order for this video to not be an hour long, but it was fun to try to make sense of these things, as they're so oddly specific in blockbuster cinema history. Hopefully next time I talk about Transformers, it'll be something of a much higher quality, or maybe even what I would like to see from a Transformers film. If you'd like to see more of this, let me know in the comments, along with what your favorite bit from these movies are, no matter how small they might be. In fact, give some suggestions for other bits of lore, or franchises that you think deserve this treatment, and maybe I'll look into them. And of course, if you enjoyed this, like and subscribe, so you can get more Flip videos coming very soon. And as always, thanks for watching.